if you're just looking at diversity through that really traditional lens, then you are missing out on so many people who could bring huge, resilience to your organisation, problem solving, innovation, like all of these things that businesses are crying out for.
Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we're joined by Emma Freivogel. Hi, Emma. How are you?
Hey, mate. I'm really good. I'm so sorry it's taken so long to get this far.
We are here, and that's what matters.
Bloody brilliant. Thanks for having me.
So we start the podcast with, who is Emma?
Who is Emma? Gosh, if someone could tell me that, I'd pay them a lot of money because Emma evolves every day. The headlines are, I'm a bloody Aussie. I've been living in London for 11 years. I moved over here because I sold my part of the house I bought with my stoner ex-boyfriend. I had this money, I pay off my debt, and I was like, I'm going on an adventure. Landed in London, 11 years ago, and found a chosen family, the best humans in London, and started a small charity and then another sort of profit for good. And I've inherited a grumpy bastard cat. So I've got all the roots now in London. I'm not going anywhere. And how would I describe myself? I guess I'm a bit of a social justice warrior. I'm a mad fan of the underdog. And short, definitely short. What else can I say about myself? I'm a pretty good cook.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What's your favourite dish?
If I had to woo you, Mira, it would be probably, you're not vegetarian, are you?
No.
Good, because I don't trust vegetarians. No offence to the vegetarians listening or watching. I hope that doesn't lose me followers.
No, you're all good.
If I had to woo you, I'd start with some garlic and chili prawns in like a butter sauce with like crispy, crunchy bread. And then maybe a fillet steak for dinner with yummy, crunchy golden potatoes and salad.
That sounds amazing.
And we do wine and cheese for dessert because what woman doesn't love wine and cheese?
You have to end with wine and cheese.
Oh my God, I'm hungry
or even
just thinking about it.
With wine and cheese.
I could start, do the middle and the end with wine and cheese. That's how much I like wine and cheese.
I agree. And what got you into the justice warrior as you described yourself?
Oh gosh, got to blame my mum for that. So my mum, Jude, was the youngest of 7 children. Her parents came over from England to Australia, Melbourne, many, many moons ago, and were incredibly poor, really, really poor. So my mum had spent some time in care and in the lead up to that, didn't probably have a particularly nurturing childhood in the sense that, she was the youngest, so she wore everyone else's hand-me-downs. Yeah. Often they didn't have loads of money to, buy, fresh food, these types of things. And her mum was an undiagnosed, we think, bipolar disorder. Right. So she really struggled with her mental health for all of her life until she died by suicide, actually, in my mum's backyard, sadly. And I guess her sort of values from her experience as a child was you've got to look after people, Right, yeah. No matter where you come from, you have all the opportunities every single day to be kind to other people. So I kind of grew up with those values, and she operated sort of an open door policy. So any kid without love could come through our door and be loved and nurtured and nourished in the ways that kids need, Yeah. And my dad, sort of conversely, was absolutely terrible with children, didn't know what to do with them, but he would feed anyone who came through our door. And we had families live with us, for long periods of time that were going through terrible divorces and things like this. So, learned from a really young age, I think, that just being kind and providing people with the dignity and the respect that, we all deserve, but often not everyone has, is sort of fundamental. So that's sort of, without explicitly teaching that's what I knew to be right and good.
And so what was it like growing up in Oz as a youngster for you, with your parents kind of bringing people in and children and families in to your home, your house?
Well, it was more my mum, not
Your
my
mum.
my parents.
Yeah. Okay.
I think my dad
More
could have done
your
without.
mum.
What was it like? I've never really thought about it. I mean, I think sort of I used to find it really fucking irritating as a kid because I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
You know, we would go on, you know, really cheap holidays, you know, camping trips and things like that by the beach. And mum would always insist on inviting someone else's kids. And I used to think, God, mum, can't it just be us? We had this one young person, Rowan, and I think my memory's terrible. I think he had cerebral palsy. I can't remember exactly. And I remember having a conversation and mum would retell this story. So I don't know whether I'm actually remembering it happening or remembering being told.
It, yeah.
But I had this sort of penny drop moment, privileged penny drop moment as a kid in a tent. That was what mum would describe the turning point for me, the time that I started understanding. And I said, you know, why does Rowan have to come? He wrecks everything because he was a whingy kid, you know, and everything was slower and blah, blah, blah. And he didn't make friends easily. And we all had to really make a conscious effort to include him, which of course we did because that was the expectation. But I remember being told, you know, why does Rowan have to come? You know, he's this, he's that. And mum made the point, you know, if he doesn't come on our holidays, who does he go with? And that's a really important sort of lesson and learn. I think, you know, my childhood was great. I mean, and my mum and my dad were a buffer from a whole load of awful, terrible things that children shouldn't know about. So I'm very blessed to have been raised, you know, under a roof that was safe and loving unconditionally. And I'm also very blessed to have, you know, the only sort of expectation for my parents was to go get an education when I was a kid. I remember wanting to work and not being allowed to. My friends were working, I wasn't allowed to. My friends were wearing, you know, makeup and clothes that women wear, I wasn't allowed to. These types of things really pissed me off when I was a kid. But now if I look back, you know, I was able to be a kid for as long as possible. And that is such a huge privilege in this world because there's so many kids that are expected to go to work, you know, because the family needs them to earn.
Yeah.
Or for whom, you know, education was never an expectation, much less a priority. And so all of these things really set me up for success. I sort of, you know, I'm a relatively well-grounded individual who knows herself. I think I've got sort of good morals that guide most of my decision making. I'm not perfect by any sort of stretch of the imagination, but certainly those knowing what is right and what is wrong and what is, you know, things that I'm happy to compromise and not have made living in this world and sort of finding my path and my direction a hell of a lot easier.
And so what brought you to the UK or London? Like, why leave?
Yeah, Australia is a beautiful place, don't get me wrong. It's vast. There are so many sort of pockets to explore. I didn't appreciate that when I left. But I broke up with my former boyfriend, who was my dear friend, and I loved him. But he was also a stoner. And, I mean, the Xbox was getting more action than I was. That aside, you know, it's very hard to have a conversation with someone who's sort of locked into you know, the TV or, you know, these types of things. And he and I, in retrospect, you know, hindsight, were the polar opposite. You know, he was a tradie. I was far from it. You know, he didn't really have any aspirations to travel the world or really stretch his mind, things like that, and was very content, and I was not. So ended up selling my part of the house to him and convincing my friend Bianca to pack in her cushy job. We both had really great jobs. We both had company cars. They were senior roles, blah, blah, blah. And we literally gave away all of our worldly, earthly possessions, packed her shit heap of a little beep. It was a Toyota Corolla that was falling apart, and drove up the guts of Australia down the Nullarbor or up the Nullarbor, and landed in Perth because I needed a sea change. I needed to get the fuck away from him. I needed to sort of like have another. Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are often, and I certainly was, under this sort of misguided belief that if you pack up all your shit and pretend your past
is your past,
is someone else's, is in the past, you can start again. Well, that's an absolute load of shit. Sadly, all your trauma, all your crap that sits on your shoulder.
It sits in your cells.
Exactly. So I went to Perth. I very accidentally got a job in recruitment with a mob called Drake, and was running the Medocs division in Perth, so looking after like GPs, nurses, dental assistants, support workers, blah, blah, blah. Managed to turn around a couple of failing contracts, I didn't know anything about recruitment. Decided that I would never work in recruitment again, ironically. And after 10 long, painful months, because Perth is quite sleepy.
Yeah.
I decided, enough of that. I'm going to go do what I wanted to do and what I had previously intended to do, which was buy a one-way ticket and travel. So paid off my debt, and then off I went and did the sort of music festival scene, the travel of life, and got absolutely shit-faced, party too hard, blah, blah, blah. And then landed in London, where I met some assholes and some really amazing people who made it possible to stay.
And what's London been like? How long have you been here?
11 years now. Yeah. London is, I've never been sort of attached to places or things. So home is sort of where your heart is.
Yeah.
When I first came over, I really struggled to meet decent people.
London's hard.
London is really cliquey. I think especially, I'm 37 now. So I was 25, 26 when I arrived. And I find the culture amongst women in London, incredibly hard.
Yeah.
It's cliquey. It's almost bitchy. It's like quite, almost territorial,
These are my friends and you can't possibly be part of that.
Yeah. They're just not, women are not interested. The men, on the other hand, love an accent. And that was, I meet men all the time, but it's not the same kind of friendship you have with a man, mostly because I think men typically want to sleep with the women they meet. Whereas women don't. So went through my fair share of jerks who really used and abused me. I've got one of these like savior complexes, and I like to help people. It's in my DNA. I try not, be really conscious about who I choosing to help versus feeling compelled to.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of work on myself to get to the point where I can now choose most of the time.
Yeah.
And then I found the best chosen family, just really fucking great humans who would give you their coat in the middle of a blizzard straight off their back, to make sure you were warm. So that the combination of sort of finding great people, starting a charity that I've so far to date not been able to find a way to get out of. If you're watching this, do not start a charity. It's fucking hard work, okay? Don't do it. If you think about it, come here and I'll slap you. And then I've got a cat as well, a grumpy bastard cat that I found in my backyard about 9 years ago. He was adorable back then. Now he just bites my ankles and gets angry with me if I don't feed him enough on time. So those three things is what makes London home.
And when you think about the journey to get to where you are today, what was it that as a child you were aspiring to do or aspiring to be, and where and how does that compare to what you do today?
Yeah, it's a good question. To be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was growing up, and I don't think I still do. I remember sort of like year 10 in Oz, so I would have been 16 years old. And people were talking about sort of their career aspirations, their plans for the future. And people, and it's so typical. It's like, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a marine biologist, blah, 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 wank, wank, wanks, those roles that everyone wants to be.
Yeah.
I never really had or not that I recall, my mum might tell you differently, a calling, like a vocational calling. So I enrolled in education disability studies at university because teaching seemed to be like a good fit.
Right.
And I had been working in disability sort of support working, and I'd seen my mum do it as a teacher's assistant. And so I just went and did that. So I did 2 years of that, and far out, I did 2 placements in what's called special developmental schools in Oz. So a school in Bulleen, just around the road from where I lived. And I was working with young men who were autistic and non-verbal autistic. And the curriculum was, we were trying to teach them how to spell their names and do basic maths. And these young people were about to transition into the real world, like they were about to become adults. And I mean, they would never spell their own name. There was no use for that. You know, we would have been better off teaching them how to cross the road safely or make food so they could be independent, these types of things. They're interested in food. They wanted to go out and, you know, explore.
Yeah.
Not interested in numeracy and literacy, and yet we're still teaching them. So I spent all of my placement behavior controlling, behavior management, and not even positive behavior support. It was just, you know, get down from the wall, stop climbing the wall sort of stuff. And I just thought, far out. Like, the system is rigged. It is not, even the specialist sort of provision in education is fucked. And I didn't have the personal resilience to fight the system. So I decided that I would, change courses. So I went into arts, and then I was like, fuck, I don't know, this is not for me. The sort of, you know, tertiary education system, you've got to be really academically inclined. You've got to be really interested. You've got to be really disciplined. You've got to have the bank of mum behind you to live a good quality of life. And you come out of it with all this debt. And I mean, in retrospect, unless you're like in a sort of a professional discipline like a doctor or a nurse or not even education, I don't think, you know, university only teach you so much. Yeah. You know,
it's only got a certain sphere of influence.
And a lot of it is about how to conform. Yeah. You know, and I just had all of these sort of realization. I was like, what am I doing? So I left uni. And I should have, you know, I have got another 18 months worth of study, and I would have 2 double degrees under my belt. Yeah. But it hasn't, nothing I studied at university has served me well. The only thing that I think I learned from university I really take away is how to think more critically about the stuff we're told. And that was one lecturer who really blew my mind. Yeah. And insisted that we not conform.
In what kind of way did he insist?
Just, you know, you're reading a text, but why do you think it's true? Why aren't you asking questions about sort of where all of this has come from and why we all believe it? Yeah. Yeah, which is what we should be learning to do, and far before university. Like,
we should be learning that we shouldn't stop learning that as children. Yeah, because children just constantly ask but why?
Exactly. And it's one of the most beautiful things about young people is this, you know, curiosity, learning how to practice curiosity and be unapologetic about asking questions.
And all of a sudden as adults, we like, where's our curious streak gone?
But also, I think women in particular don't ask questions in certain scenarios because they don't want to be seen as, you know, unknowledgeable or, you know, overstepping the boundary or these types of things. You know, I think women very often, you know, put themselves in boxes.
And this is what I do.
We're very neat and we're, you know, and I don't speak when I'm not spoken to, and, you know, don't want to piss anyone off by asking a question that could be, I don't know, provocative or confronting for the person, you know, they're talking to, these types of things. So, that's what I studied at uni. I can't remember what the question was, but I hope I've answered it.
And so what happens when you get to the UK and you're now in a world where you've met some bad people, you've found your tribe, you've got your grumpy cat.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So I spent about, after I decided to go get a proper job, because I did 6 weeks as a bar bitch, or no, a door bitch actually. I've never worked in hospitality in my life.
Right.
And I got to the point where I was like, I need to actually do something with my days while I look for a proper, well, not a proper job, I shouldn't say that, a job that aligned with my previous career trajectory, let's put it that way.
Yep.
Jobs in hospitality are great if you've got sort of service in your blood. I do not, and I don't have the patience for drunk people in particular. But yeah, so I was a door bitch. They used to put me in where do I work? A mob called Drink Shop Do in King's Cross. It was sort of like this boutique bar where women would go for like hen stews and things like that with a terrible DJ and blah, blah, blah. And I was on the door with a big black bouncer, and I was the one that sort of, you know, did the checks of the women because men can't. Did that for 6 long weeks, hated every minute of it. Oh my God, drunk people are awful, aren't they? It's when you're sober.
Yes.
And I'm not one of these people that can drink at work because I just want to go to sleep. did that and then decided to get a proper job. So started working for an organisation that supported blind and partially sighted people, managing like a community centre and a befriending service. I used to do really cool stuff there. Like we'd get them all on a bus and go to like open mic nights, get them pissed, have a great feed. They'd all sing terribly on stage and then we'd pack them into the bus and roll them home. Really great stuff there, and then moved on to a couple of different other organisations doing similar work with different sort of people, the underdogs, so children, women, ex-offenders, blah, blah, blah. And before I sort of worked, before I founded the charity that I run, Radical Recruit, I was working for an organisation called Working Chance, and they're a really small grassroots women's organisation who support women coming out of prison to secure jobs and in theory refrain from reoffending and, reintegrate into the community and take up the roles that they did pre-prison, caring roles typically within families. And I was there, I got the job very accidentally. I was in between roles and I wanted to volunteer, and the CEO took a liking to me. She was a founder, created a role for me. So I was their COO and I was there for about 2 years and saw the power of paid work, transform on many occasions the lives of women who had nothing, absolutely nothing, and who were, mothers to one or multiple children who had nothing, And it was during that time I met a woman called Chanel, who is the inspiration behind both the Radical brands. So Shan was at that time, I think about 25, 26, black, queer, raised in the West Midlands by two parents who were 13 and 14 respectively when they had her.
Wow.
Her parents were belonged to two rival gangs. And she was one of 16 siblings and born into generational poverty. So you can imagine what the family home looked like. I use the term home very loosely.
Yeah.
Anyway, Shan, when I met her, was in H&P Downview. So it's a women's prison in Surrey. And she just finished a 6-year sentence, custodial sentence for threats to kill and what was the other thing? Threats to kill and I can't think what the other thing is. I'll remember it later. So arson, that's right. Serious offences. And she had spent about 10 years in prison since she was old enough to sort of go to prison. So I think she was in her first custodial in a youth offending institution around the age of 14. And she'd had 47 convictions by that time, so a really long rap sheet.
Wow.
And my role, it was part of my induction, was to call her in prison and cobble together what I now know to be a shitty version of a great CV and support her to find work because she was going to be released in 6 or 7 or 8 weeks' time.
Right.
And she was being released to a supported hostel in Reading because she was a mapper. Anyway, she was talking, and you don't get a lot of time when you call someone in prison. Have you been to a prison before?
No.
No, haven't got caught for anything?
No.
That's good. There's still time.
There's
We're
still
only three bad decisions away from a prison sentence.
Great, can't wait.
I'll come visit you.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. In prison, it's really hard to do anything outside of the regime. You can imagine they're not fit for purpose. Purpose-built buildings often. They're cold, they're grey, they're overcrowded. And you've got a whole load of people, especially in the women's estate, who, have survived domestic violence and done their crimes under duress, generally of a man, who have really serious alcohol and drug-related sort of, what is it?
Addiction.
Thank you. Yep. Glad you're here. Who were homeless and have offended because they've got nowhere safe to sleep at night, or they've stolen to feed their kids, or, they haven't paid their TV license. So typically not violent crimes like Shan's and typically, totally avoidable if the state did what the state should do. Let's not go there though. Anyway, so she was talking about sort of her history, and then she was telling me, I said, what have you done since you've been in prison? Because that's a really good indicator of whether or not someone's going to come out and make use of any opportunities we facilitate. Anyway, she spoke to me about this catering service down the cake hole that she'd founded. And so Shan loved food and she'd learned how to cook from her grandmother, who was a really important figure in her life, sadly passed away now. But she founded this catering service, and she was catering for the governor and for lots of the charities that were coming in to run events and things like this. And she was due to cater an event we were doing in a few weeks' time. And I said, what's your why? Like, why did you go down this path, knowing that to get sort of that project approved by the governor, she would have to jump through hoops, you know.
Of course.
And so she said, look, I wanted to give lifers, so women on life sentences, opportunities to gain skills that they could use on release. Because rehabilitation in the women's estate is very often not skills and employment focused. So you can go and do craft, but that's not going to get you a job.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And there's a lot of like hairdressing and, you know, very typical sort of gendered opportunities that not everyone wants, you know. And I just thought, and she was talking about the fact that she trains, you know, a group of women and they were doing qualifications and blah, blah, blah. Bloody brilliant, you know. So because she was catering the event that I was helping to run, so we're bringing a whole load of suits, whole load of corporates from different organisations into the prison to do interview prep with, and in the chapel.
Yep.
And so a whole load of women and employers who wanting to do some good. And I was determined to get someone over to meet her because I just thought she's fucking brilliant. And without a job, she'd go straight back to the gang life. Like, I mean, her family are still trying to recruit her 6-7 years on. And what happened then? Yeah, so Ollie, who was a former head of people at Honest Burgers, I called him up. I said, I've met this fucking brilliant woman. She could be on next, like, Star Chef. Please come and meet her. Anyway, he came to the prison as a volunteer and she was catering the event and she fed him a piece of her grandmother's recipe carrot cake. And he said, this is a quote, it was the best fucking piece of carrot cake I've ever tasted. And followed that on with sort of, what are your prospects post-release? And of course, she didn't have any. Like, someone with arson and 46 other bloody, you know, convictions, hard to employ, right? A whole load of misplaced fear about people like Shan. And she said, I'm being released in Reading. I've got nothing lined up. You know, this is what I want to do, work with food. So he offered an interview. So the day she got released, she went from prison to Honest Burgers Reading, where he happened to be opening a new store.
Right.
And she interviewed for a dish pick role, brought her portfolio with all the photos of the food she'd made and all, you know, references and stuff like that. And he gave her a job. So him, Ollie, Shan and I were talking at this amazing conference, the Reward Gateway Engagement Excellence Summit. And the theme that year was HR Rebels. And us three were on a panel talking about, you know, the power of, you know, what can happen when the third sector and the corporate world unite in a common purpose.
Yeah.
And she's telling her story to a packed room with no public speaking experience or training. And she was speaking so passionately.
And heartfelt.
And bravely, like the courage she showed to tell her story. And like, this woman should not have been alive on paper. She's had guns held to her head, knives to her throat by family members.
Yeah.
When daring not to do what she's been asked. You know, she's got you know, charges like, you know, weapons, possession of weapons and things like that. She'd hide under the bed for her father and her uncles and stuff like this. She used to have to prostitute herself out to earn enough money to eat because her mum thought she was fat and would restrict access to
food.
So you can appreciate, like, the odds were stacked against her. And here she is, 18 months after a release, having been offered one opportunity that changed the trajectory of her life. And she's advocating for people like her to an audience she's never met, who could not imagine the circumstances she and other women like her come from.
And she can't connect with because they're completely different people.
They're just completely different. And I just thought, wow. You know, she was saying things like, I used to go to prison for respite.
Wow.
Imagine being in such tumultuous circumstances where you felt so fearful for your life and your safety.
That prison was a respite.
That prison was a safe place. And I thought, this is just, it took all my being not to have an absolute meltdown on stage because I didn't realize the value of the work that we were doing.
Right.
I really had no idea up until that point. But that for me was a real turning point because it was the first time that I had pitched, not in a meeting obviously, but had a conversation about the work we did where I got huge amounts of buy-in. And it was all thanks to Shan and the fact that she had proven that it is possible.
That she can change.
She spoke so compellingly about the opportunities those in the room who had loads of privilege had to rebrand their privilege and use it as a vehicle for good in business and in any community, So that was it. That's how I, started Radical. I was like, fucking hell, if I can do that for someone like Shan, who is unemployable.
And so what is Radical Recruit?
Yeah, so we're now a small grassroots organisation that supports people who are furthest from the labour market to acquire the skills and the confidence and the tools and the courage they need to think about what a good career might look like for them, what good work, meaningful work would look like for them. And then helping them to sort of, through a really tailored provision, get to the point where they know what they want to do. They know why they're a great candidate for the roles that they're looking to target. They've got everything they need to go and apply and navigate through a competitive recruitment process against candidates from the mainstream who, have had the benefit of safe housing and loving relationships and education and all of this stuff that makes it possible to sort of excel in the world. And what we do is we work with employers who are small and medium enterprises, but also very large corporates like your household names like Sage and Warner Media and WPP. And we support them to diversify their talent pipelines and recruit what we now call radical talent into their organisations, and then obviously start them well and support them to develop them and hopefully progress in their chosen careers. So we've done around 700 placements now. We've been going since October 2019, just before the pandemic shut down recruitment in London, as if speccing in like a person who's just come out of prison wasn't hard enough. Thanks, plague. And we just wrap everyone in support, the candidate and the employer, so that the employer is ready to receive and welcome radical talent into their organisations. They're designing and facilitating really fair and kind and inclusive recruitment processes. They get the support they need to really empathise with the challenges the different candidates we represent, face.
Yeah.
And design onboarding processes that get the best out of them. And then we support them with anything that could turn into a big problem if, leadership isn't empathetic, isn't congruent, isn't, centred around that sort of belief that people have potential and the unconditional regard, really.
Yeah.
And could become really big problems, as they often do, because people leadership, it's so hard to get a great people leader.
Yeah. If
you're someone like me who can advocate for yourself and who knows what they need by way of sort of support at work and things like that. So we've got a 92% in work sustainability rate at the 6-month mark. We've placed over 100 people that were rough sleeping in the pandemic. And basically we just try and find people good work with great employers who are doing more than just talking about diversity, more than just talking about that social pillar in their ESG frameworks, and actually
taking the action to do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
This episode is brought to you by Play for Change. Play for Change brings together leadership coaching, expert facilitation, and builds communities. They help craft real connections, spark learning, and turn play into powerful experiments to enable better relationships with yourself and others around you. To find out more, go to playforchange.co.uk. Links are in the show notes below. What an amazing cause of trying to genuinely make a difference. It's not this massive charity that all gets through the funding, etc. And is Radical Recruit the charity arm?
Yeah, so we started off as a CIC just to pilot it,
fine.
and then accidentally got some funding from the GLA, which meant that I had money to recruit in this team. And at that point, I had no idea about recruitment, not a fucking clue, not really. I just talked a good game, and that's sort of how we started.
But you had your experience from Oz as well when you did a little bit of recruitment then.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, like it's apples and pears. Like the service we provide to our candidates and to our employers is so vastly different.
Of course it is.
And it has to be in order for us to be a really quality recruitment partner and a really agile, responsive service for radical talent.
Yeah.
But yeah, now we're a fully fledged charity. So we started trading in March 2023. We've just filed our first report and accounts, so now we can bid for funds. So now a charity, but previously a CIC.
And so that whole process, because what I hear often is we get great talent through the door. They have made it through the recruitment process. But if you look at the 3 months, the 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, that's where it starts drifting. And that's because we don't set up the organizations. We don't have the processes, the systems, the people, the advocacy within the organization. So it's fab that we do all of this upfront work, but then we need to continue it. And what you've actually just described is you're helping organizations do some of that from an onboarding point of view. And so it's not you've just got the talent through the door and then goodbye. You're actually helping and supporting through as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, when someone comes to us, a radical, they go through a really rigorous process that helps us to determine sort of all of the experiences that have shaped them and perhaps led to where they are today, which is in a position where they need some help to get a job. And so we sort of can determine whether or not they're suitable for our services because we're not a housing provider and we're not a domestic violence service and blah, blah, blah. So really try and stick in our lane.
You've got to keep your boundaries really strong.
Absolutely.
And your emotions as well. God, it's got to be tough.
The team that do the real work, the grunt work on the ground, have the emotional resilience of something very, very bloody tough. I can't think what, but it's a hard job, definitely.
Of course.
And so through those conversations, we can kind of understand, what the challenges are and whether or not we can support them. And where sort of specialist services are needed, we will make a referral, signpost them to other services. It might be that we do our work simultaneously. And then they go through this really, intensive process that gets them from, potentially not knowing what they want to do to, ready to take themselves to market, be represented in front of us. So unlike sort of your mainstream sharky bastard recruiters, we know our candidates inside and out. So we're asking questions like, have you got an unspent conviction? Have you ever had contact with the criminal justice system? Tell me about your childhood. Have drugs and alcohol ever been a big part of your life? So the beautiful thing about working with us is that we have access to all of these insights that will help us to determine whether someone's actually work ready or not, whether someone's got the skills and capability to get through an interview, what they're going to need when they start by way of reasonable adjustments, for example, for people who are disabled or have neurodivergent conditions or chronic health conditions, whatever, people who have, probation requirements because they've been through the criminal justice system, these types of things. It could be that we learn things like, this woman's been, give you an example, we've got a young radical who was assaulted by 2 men in a park not long ago. So she's a violent survivor. And our client was interviewing her and they had 2 men on the panel. Yeah. So we were, things like you can't have 2 men on the panel for this candidate. I mean, it's not good practice anyway, but that would completely derail an interview for her. Yeah. Especially in a small room with a door
behind her
exactly,
where she feels really trapped.
So through this sort of intel data gathering exercise, we tailor our provisions, obviously, and what we deliver, but we can also help to inform the marketing campaigns, engagement strategies, assessments, recruitment sort of process for our clients. And that feeds into onboarding, support and development. So for example, we've got a young chap, he's going for a sort of a data accounting type role with a accounting firm in London Bridge. he's very autistic and he really struggles to connect with people, except when he's talking about chess or what else is he like, cricket or physics. And so when he gets an interview, we say to the interviewer, is there anyone on the panel could spare 10 minutes to talk about any of these three things? Because we know that's going to loosen him up.
Yeah, just to get him warm and ready.
And so he's due to have an interview on Friday with this great firm. I saw a post on LinkedIn. I was talking about him. They said, we've got a role. We're not sure what it's going to look like, but we'd love to meet him. And so he's going to go to this interview. He's got 15 minutes ahead of time to orientate himself to the building. Really important if you're autistic and don't like change. And to have a chat about cricket, because one of the panelists fucking loves cricket too. And that will make the difference between a good interview and a great interview, you know? So these are the types of things that we try to do to make sure that our radicals are accommodated, but also our clients are really well prepared to think about, like, who are they wanting to interview that aren't in their organisation? How are we going to get them through their talent pipeline? What things do we need to do differently, you know?
Yeah. And just to be truly diverse, it's so great saying we're a diverse employer, but do you go to that length to ensure?
Most organisations we talk to have no they can't define diversity, or they do through very traditional constructs, more brown people, more women, maybe a queer here and there, you know, just to spice things up.
We'll support the gays occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, you talk to a handful of their team and everyone's got different definition of diversity. It could be so much bigger. And from a talent acquisition perspective, if you don't have a radical definition of diversity, if you're just looking at diversity through that really traditional lens, then you are missing out on so many people who could bring huge, you know, resilience to your organisation, problem solving, innovation, like all of these things that businesses are crying out for.
But also they need to market, and these diverse groups of people are obviously also their customers, or could also be their customers.
Exactly, yeah.
So Chanel gave you the inspiration, I suppose. What's kept you going?
No one in corporate will give me a job because I swear too much.
So you've had to find it yourself.
I don't have a fucking choice, do I? Look at me. I've rocked up in my I've got, I don't know whether you can see it. I've got my sweats on.
Oh, you look great, and it's comfy and all of that stuff.
We should have done this a year ago, I swear, because you're great for my ego. Why do I do it? I do it because even the smallest wins feel incredibly important.
But also it's an uphill struggle and a battle. And now that you've made some progress, my assumption is it's getting a teeny tiny bit easier.
I think the challenges are different. So originally it was like, you know, I go around begging, and I'm not the type to beg. I don't know whether you notice that, but that's not me. I had to put my pride in a bag and just go and beg for vacancies so I could prove the model worked.
Yeah.
And then the next challenge was obviously like surviving through the plague and Brexit and the 16 government changes and all of the uncertainty that creates without our sort of employer customer base.
Yeah.
And then it was sort of transitioning from, you know, a CIC into a charity and all of the governance work around that. I've got 5 bosses now, those poor bastards.
Wonderful.
So having to sort of transition into a proper
charity.
Yeah, but also act like a CEO.
Yeah.
Which I struggle to do. And what a wank name for for a person who runs an organisation that's only 5 paid people strong. We do have an amazing volunteer army of about 600 people who help.
Yeah.
So we are a big organisation in that sense. So they're the challenges now. Now it's like, and I used to do all the candidate facing work. I don't have to do that anymore. So now the challenges are around like, how do we pay the bills at night? How do we position ourselves as a really meaningful, recruitment partner for organisations who have previously got, you know, partnerships for free with charities like mine. So sort of really, you know, trying to transition from that power dynamic where, you know, our clients or would-be clients are like, you should be really thankful to be associated with our brand, versus clients who really believe that what we offer them is so valuable and worth paying for. So that's a challenge for me now. I spend my life fundraising. I spend my life sort of talking about the work we do, hoping that, the business community will start taking it with the seriousness that it deserves. Going back to sort of like the business case for doing all of this, diversity has been proven to improve your bottom line. Like there's so many credible sources out there from the most amazing institutions that prove that doing this work is really important and it will benefit your business. But it's still not taken.
It's still the first thing to be ignored or changed as soon as...
it's still not, it's not understood in the context of the business case by those up top. There's a lack of sponsorship, executive sponsorship, which means that these programs aren't resourced properly, which means that they're, the value they create isn't measured and so on.
It's usually a side of a desk person's job and it's a little hobby that they've taken on board on top of everything else they're doing.
Or it's someone who's experienced homelessness and understands why it's so important that business works with the third sector to fucking do this work, because we all know the government bloody aren't doing it.
So if you were going to ask the listeners for something to take away, to think about, to consider, what would be your ask?
That's a good question. I think there are two things. I think to do this work as an organisation well, you need to know where you are on the map. So, when you go to a shopping centre and you've got the big map and it says you are here.
Yeah.
And I want to get to John Lewis because they do really good work with care leavers, by the way.
Excellent.
Ethical brand. There you go. I want to go to John Lewis. I can see where I am and all the different turns and, elevators and whatever I've got to take or make to get to where I want to go. The problem that we often encounter and that really folks stumble over is this piece around, okay, well, where are we on the map? Most organisations won't have the data they need to develop an all singing, all dancing strategy.
Yeah.
But knowing where you are, what the baseline is, and having really actionable and achievable KPIs around diversity and social value that are understood by key players in the business is really, really important. It's like, why does, that person who's taken on diversity, why does their work matter to me?
Yeah.
Why is this stuff important for the organisation? So being able to link, having the data and being able to link, the business case for doing better is absolutely vital. So, I'll give you an example. We've just helped one of our clients. They're a design construction consultancy, and they were bidding for a Crown Estate bid to develop 50 homes, ethical green homes. And a good percentage of the weighting, I can't say exactly, was, to do with social value, diversity. Social value and diversity. So they brought us in to help write that part of the bid, and we would be a delivery partner if they got the bid. So doing some really innovative stuff.
Yeah,
they got the project, and that weighting was, had they not had our expert advice, they probably wouldn't have got the project through, because they don't know what to do. They have no idea how to build this stuff in.
But it's knowing where to go and asking the right questions that helps.
And it's also bringing in partners who are experts. This sort of like hitting and hoping approach, it doesn't work. You need to. This
just
needs
going
to
to close
be built,
my eyes and pray.
Yeah, it needs to be built into the fabric of your organisation. The DNA of your organisation, so that when you're writing bids, you're writing this stuff into your bids.
And we talked about earlier being really curious and how we lose some of that as we get older, and just continuing that curiosity of why is this important, and not necessarily having all the answers, but going, I want to be curious to understand why I don't know. So let me go find out.
Yeah, but this is a problem. Social value, diversity, nice to have. So the finance director, he's like, what the fuck are we doing?
Why are we
working with Radical?
Right.
The CEO gets it. He's the one I signed. But the FD, you have to... and finding ways to explain it in a way that makes sense. So my response to that FD was, here's some rough social value calculations. When you hire a person who has been in prison for a year and you put them into a job paying 27K at entry level, they pay X back to the public purse, and the government, the public save 60K in, prison costs a year. And then community cohesion increases by this, and there's a value associated with that.
And they are connected to what they were doing previously, so somebody else sees that they've made a change.
Exactly. And so all of a sudden you can attach this value to hiring a person who's been to prison, and that value increases every year they remain in work. So it's about finding ways to make it make sense to the people at the top holding the purse strings who have influence.
Yeah.
So many of the organisations we work with, like you say, you've got a great human who's passionate about whatever, and they've been tasked with the diversity work, social value work, but they've got sweet fuck all they need to do the work. And I mean, you might as well not try.
Yeah.
So it's about getting these people of influence brought in, definitely.
So what happens next? What's the next part of the journey for you and the charity?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd be, redundant. In an ideal world, everyone would get the same opportunities. Yeah. We would totally live in a meritocracy, and services out like ours, wouldn't be
exist.
Needed. Yeah. The reality is that's probably never going to happen. So we'll keep chipping away. I think ideally I will exit the business and hand over to a really radical person. I'm radical in some respects, but certainly not, I think there are better people for the job probably, with fresher, really more innovative ideas who are closer to the challenges, or who were closer to the challenges. Also, I think founders sort of get stale and should probably leave before the 10-year mark happens. So that's my plan, to exit the business in a really strong financial position, having sort of cultivated a network of incredibly loyal businesses who back our work and understand the value of the partnership. We'd like to sort of expand our reach. Like, the need for our services is extortionate nowadays. We don't do any marketing except on LinkedIn.
Wow.
And we are constantly receiving recommendations, referrals, self and through other services. And I think if we accepted referrals from other services, we'd be inundated. But we're getting sort of one a day at least. For a small organisation, that's far too many. So I think having the capability to meet the need, and then also sort of provide a more, I don't know how you describe this, a more specialist service, in the sense that we'd have people in the team who have a very clearly defined remit and are just experts in that post-placement support, and experts in, that pre-employment bit. Because currently we do everything. Everyone does everything because we're so under-resourced, and the need is huge. So, the aspiration is to be able to meet the need, to have, a completely radical team, people who just get it, who are movers and shakers, and then obviously it would be really nice to be sort of more secure financially, so that I can stop worrying at night. It's amazing the stress associated with paying people, especially when they're radical and that they don't have sort of a buffer of 10K in the bank savings for a rainy day type thing.
Yeah.
Not that most of us do, I'm led to believe. So yeah, they're the things. And then I guess what I'm wanting to do is set up an accommodation service, supported accommodation. So for people coming out of prison, they can get 6 months of really intensive support to sort out their debt, to get their ID, to think about like what next, to receive counselling. We've got a counselling service that's pro bono. To learn how to budget and learn how to batch cook and all the things that make it possible to live on early careers, a modest salary in London, and wrap them in support and teach them how to live, a healthy life,
to then help them go be independent.
To then move them on.
Yeah.
To more independent sort of settings, but also having sort of like a support, a mother hen type to pop in and have a cuppa and talk about what's going on. Because the smallest things can derail.
It's the community aspect of it as well when you get out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and this is the thing. Again, yesterday I had a conversation with our counterpart in a different sort of region, and she was saying that she's got one of her radicals, she doesn't call them radicals, got released from prison with a sleeping bag, the travel grant, which is sweet fuck all, no support, no one meeting her at the gate. She just went straight to the local shop and reoffended because she has nowhere to stay and it's freezing.
Yeah.
Like, this is not okay. So, yeah, accommodation services, support accommodation to help people transition out of really shitty situations into better lives, you know. And then I'm very keen to develop a therapy service, a therapeutic service, not just talking therapy. I'm talking about really, you know, teaching resilience and I don't know what it looks like yet, but my mum's we're working on that. Some ideas in the back of my head. So we need sponsorship for both of those things. Any corporates want to do some good that are listening, they're the sort of aspirations.
And what's next for the charity?
So we've got to get through Christmas. Christmas is a really bloody hard time for radicals. You know, suicide rates go up at Christmas. Mental illness is rife. Yeah. It's a really isolating time. So we're currently focusing on raising the funds we need to deal with the crisis and the relief stuff that happens. It is very sort of
immediate.
And immediate. So to give you an example of the work that we do over Christmas, you know, we'll have a dozen people that need help to get off the streets. And the cost associated with that is, we don't have it. And through sort of the winter months, you know, people are really, really bloody cold in their homes. They're not able to often sort of feed their kids. So lots of like care packages and financial aid and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the bigger picture, if we get through Christmas with our sanity intact, we're talking to a couple of amazing organisations. We're about to sign terms of business. So working with John Lewis, they're going to ring fence 40 of their entry-level vacancies for us to work on next year, which is the model finally proving that it can work. We're about to start working with a mob called Selnor. They've got 40-odd vacancies for us to work on. Agena. So we've got some amazing partnerships that are about to sort of be mobilised that will enable us to put some amazing radicals deserving of sort of opportunities to live dignified and, you know, healthy lives into work. So that's the focus, is really, you know, nailing this sponsorship model and getting it absolutely right so that we can expand our reach, because that's what's been missing.
Yeah.
It's these volume recruitment opportunities and companies that are like really committed to working with us to get it right, you know, and embed it into their organizations.
Purpose.
Yeah. Most days, some days you'll find me under my desk, rocking side to side, bottle of vodka in one hand, cigarette in the other, thinking, what the fuck have I done? You know,
it's hard because you've decided to do something that isn't the easy way, isn't the easy road.
Yeah.
And emotionally, the support that you need and the self-care you need has got to be tremendous as well.
Yeah. To be honest, though, I've got the best girl gang. Like, my girlfriends are brilliant. They're just kind, empathetic, intuitive, wonderful women. And my mum's with a woman, and she and Jude and Suze are like just rocks for me. So I'm surrounded by amazing women, and my two business partners, Holly and Kirsty, are just the fucking best. So I do have like this amazing support network around me, and I lean on them willingly now that I've learned how to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Which is a lesson in itself. So I'm very, very blessed. And honestly, you know, the great days are just better than closing £1 million deals. I'm telling you right now, if you've not worked in a charity setting, either voluntarily or in a paid capacity, you are missing out on some of the life's just great moments, because there's nothing like calling a person who's been beaten black and blue for years by her ex, who's got, you know, a kid to feed, and telling them that, you know, we've sorted accommodation and they've got a job offer.
Incredible.
That is a beautiful thing. So, the work's hard, but in moments like those, it's such a privilege to be involved in helping people walk with purpose into their futures. Who doesn't want that?
What an incredible Purpose.
Thank you.
We started this conversation with who is Emma? I'm going to take you right back round and go, is there anything that you would add or change?
Oh, gosh, these are hard questions.
Sorry, I didn't make them up. I promise I didn't.
Anything I would add or change? I think I'm just a great believer in like using the assets you've got as a vehicle for good. And I think like I've never had loads of money, you know. I don't have vast networks. I don't have loads of things that are valuable. None of that. But every day I find something that I have in my back pocket, a resource, an asset, whatever, that I can utilize to do something good. You know, that's at my core. I believe that. So I kind of feel like, you know, the one thing that I would like people to take away is think about what you've got that you can offer in aid of, you know, a good cause or, you know, someone in need that perhaps you're not using for that purpose. That would be like the one thing that I would like people to take away. And it doesn't have to be a huge budget to do this work. It could be, you know, you're on LinkedIn and you see someone who's desperately trying to work, and instead of going past that, you know, find a job, sorry, instead of scrolling past that post, give it a like and fucking comment so that your network can see it. They're really basic, simple things like that that can be life-changing for people who are like walking paths that you probably won't ever bloody walk yourself. Do you know what I mean? So I think, you know, like if I were to describe myself, someone who sort of looks for those opportunities, definitely, and would encourage others to do the same.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, mate. Oh, and can I do a shout out for the crowdfunder?
Of course.
Great. So we're crowdfunding to keep our services going next year, to get us through the sort of dry spell. We're now able to bid for grants and things like that, and the model's sort of kicking off and all that. But we do need to diversify our funding stream. So we are crowdfunding. So if people want to get involved, you can go to Crowdfunder and search Radical Recruit. It's a 2024 campaign. Please donate if you can. Every penny gets matched up to £250 by the fabulous folk at Aviva, which is really cool. So, you know, £1 turns into 2, 10 turns into 20. If you've got more than that, I'll love you forever. And I'll shower you in champagne, cheap champagne, when I win the lottery. Or you can do a little mini fundraiser yourself. So I've been running 5Ks a day for 50 days. I'm on day number 22, I think, today, just to raise awareness. But we're doing a park run on the 10th of December. I'm not sure whether this episode will come out, but if you hear this and you want to come and do the park run with us, great. Or do a mini fundraiser yourself.
And we'll put the links in the show notes
below. That would be great. Yeah, or just connect with me. Like if your organisation or you're a leader who's looking for like a social value, ESG, diversity, recruitment partner, whatever you call us, we have access to the most amazing talent that you will not find anywhere else. And we can facilitate some great introductions to people who desperately want to work and who, if you look after, will never leave your business. So, yeah, get in touch if you're looking for really great, diverse talent.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Finally.
If you enjoyed that conversation, please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family. Subscribe, follow, and like. It really helps us continue to grow. Keep being you through connection, learning, and play. You are a class of your own.